you know. Hey guys, this is Neethi the pharmacist. I'm here live with Dr. Shawn Baker, the author of the Carnivore Diet, and one of the founders of MeatRx, amongst other things. Hey guys. So, Dr. Baker, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you here. Hey guys, listen, one of the reasons I really wanted to have Dr. Baker come talk with everyone is because, Doc, I talk to so many ranchers, so many farmers who are producing this regenerative meat, and they just don't even understand the power of the life-giving force and medicine that they're producing and the husbandry that they're doing and how powerful it is. And so I want to dedicate this episode to all the ranchers and all the farmers out there raising regenerative livestock. This is for you. I wanted you to be able to walk in your full power, and I wanted you to listen to what Dr. Baker is saying about the power of the meat. And everybody, all the farmers and the ranchers ought to have a copy of his book and a copy of my book and be passing them out to anybody who comes that wants to be a customer. Welcome, Doc.
Hey, Neethi, thank you very much. And I just looked down and I see my battery is really low on this device. And so I find if I can find a place to plug in that'll allow this. I might have to make another move, unfortunately. So I'm gonna try to walk and talk. Do
you want me to do you want us to start again in a few minutes?
No, that's okay. I can multitask. I'm pretty good at that. But I'm just trying to find a decent power supply that allows me to both communicate with you and have an internet signal. So I'm gonna go in the house and hopefully it won't be too noisy. But yeah, I first of all, I don't know who's in your audience, but if you do have a lot of ranchers, I like to say thank you to those guys, because those guys and gals that do that, because without you, we wouldn't have this wonderful product that we depend on for our nutrition. And I think when I spoke with U.S. Cattlemen's Association a couple of years, I had to convince these people that they were producing a health food, because they had been sort of brainwashed by the. Just going to walk around for a second. Brainwashed by the the media and the sort of the food guidelines that meat is not actually healthy for you, when it is clearly based on evidence of thousands and thousands of people and. Evolutionary evidence that it.
You're losing internet.
Quantities.
You broke up, Doc, because you lost signal for just a minute.
Okay.
You were talking about evolution.
Yeah, let me just, sorry, I'm trying to find a platform so I can make this work. Apologize. Yeah, but what I was saying is that humans are uniquely suited to thrive on meat, and we do very well. And
it's okay. Dr. Baker is having to walk around. His house is under construction, so he's
all the other woes that occur.
We lost you for a little bit, but I was telling everybody about how your house is being worked on.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a spot where I can get power and still communicate with you. So I think I'm there. And I had to set up a platform so I can. So we're looking at my belly button.
You're okay.
Yeah, I'm just gonna untangle the power cord, because I thought I had power outside, but for some reason the power's not working, and so.
With all the work they're doing, they might have turned the power off, I guess.
Okay, so I'm plugged in. So I've got juice. I've got a signal. We don't have too much noise right now. So yeah, I mean, I think it's something to understand. I mean, I'm a physician and I take care of people's health, and I see tremendous improvements in health by utilizing meat, particularly red meats. And this is what a lot of our, ranchers do. And, the fact that it is currently under attack is you have to be under a rock and sleeping to not realize that. And it's something that we need to push back with full force. I want the ranchers to know that we appreciate what you're doing and stay in the fight. I know they're making it harder and harder, and I'm trying to generate enough education and interest to support these folks. And, stuff like what Niti's doing and others is a definite step in the right direction. I think I'm encouraged by the fact that, it's frustrating to see people saying they're going to, like Epicurious magazine just announced they're no longer going to be producing beef recipes in order to quote unquote save the planet. That's obviously something that's frustrating and kind of pisses people off. But the good thing is, when you look at the commentary based on that, 98% of the people are saying this is ridiculous, this is stupid, meat is a health food, meat is something that we can do to improve the planet through regenerative ag. So that message is getting out there. A lot of people are waking up to that as a solution. So we need to continue. And I say, instead of playing defense all the time, defending it, we need to be on offense, and we need to get out there and say, look, this is a health food. We need more of it. We need more, of beef, particularly raised a certain way, which, and you can carry over to other livestock things as well. But this is something that needs to be, the common person needs to understand that. And the only way they're going to understand it if we just 24 hours a day shout it from the rooftops and not back down and not concede anything. I think there's talks about, cutting meat back to save the environment, and, people saying, well, no, the government would never ban meat or do that. But what they'll do, as you guys will know, is they'll make it harder. They'll make it harder for the average rancher to make a living, so that they go out of business, or they'll take the land away, like, the 30-30 law, that executive order that was passed, where they're going to put 30% of the land in federal conservancy. And that may mean some, ranchers in Nebraska get their land taken from them. They're trying to prevent states' rights protect state and local governments' rights from deciding that it'll be all federal. And so there's a lot of things out there we need to fight. But understand, first and foremost, what you guys produce as ranchers is undeniably a tremendous health food, and we need to understand that. And once we understand that the critical nature of having meat in the diet, then we need to fight for it and fight for it like our lives depend on it, because they honestly do.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for being an oath keeper, and thank you for your service. And I think everybody needs to know that this is a time for everyone to rise. There aren't enough people who are brave enough right now to just stand up for what is correct. And on the note of everything that you've said so far, one of the things I've been having fun doing is sharing your videos that you're doing recently of you eating. Because people, when they start doing this carnivore diet, they are seriously brainwashed to death, Doc, that they're going to die if they eat a certain amount. I want to know who it was that came up with the portions, because I will say that as a female who's 50, it's very difficult to feel comfortable eating the amount of meat that I need to eat, because I can't just eat one little piece of meat. And like when I'm going somewhere, it feels crazy, or you feel gluttonous if you're like, I need 2 ribeyes at least. And then here's Dr. Baker on a video eating 6 ribeyes. I showed it to my husband. I said, this is how you're supposed to eat. This is how you're supposed to eat. I said, well, yeah, he's like 6'7" or something crazy, but this is how you're supposed to eat if you want to nourish yourself. So as a physician, I would like for you to explain to everybody what is the correct amount of nutrition, how much is the right amount of meat, because we all know if we start eating this way, that if we're not allowing ourselves to feast correctly, the hormonal reset that we require to be able to overcome the metabolic problems that we have, especially at women. I think men do too, but they don't want to talk about that they have a hormonal problem. But can you please speak towards that?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, you have to look at the assumption that, you have to be eating the right diet for your species. And humans are probably the only animal out there that doesn't do that anymore. You know, I mean, you could argue that some of the pets we have, they end up, and what happens, they all end up fat and diabetic. And that's what we see just all over the place now. And so we try and feed ourselves with food we're not really designed to eat, and we don't get the nutrition we need, and we continue to eat and eat and eat and eat. And our hunger signals are never quite satisfied, and we suffer health-wise from that. So when it comes to, eating meat and research study after research study, particularly if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, showing that humans were voracious meat eaters throughout our evolution. It was only in recent times that we had to drift away from that, as we basically made a lot of the big animals we relied on go extinct. And so once that happened, we had to rely on smaller, leaner animals. We had to rely on more plant foods, and eventually developing agriculture, which allowed for civilization, but ultimately resulted in the decrease in individual health. Once you start eating food you're designed to eat, and a meat-based diet, you'll find that appetite is pretty well matched with needs. And so if you're hungry, you should eat, and you should eat enough to fill you up. And for some people, it's quite a bit. Like for me, I'm pretty typically running on about 4 pounds of meat a day. And I mean, that's what I have. Sometimes I'll just eat in one sitting. I'm able to eat, a lot in one sitting, and that works pretty well. And so, and I stay lean and I stay healthy, and I'm not hungry. And so I think it's important because, it's just from a sustainability standpoint, if you're constantly hungry, you're not going to be able to do any particular diet. If you the other thing is enjoying what you eat. And you got to hopefully enjoy. Most of you guys enjoy a nice steak or T-bone, ribeye, whatever it is, and that gives you both a very nice a gustatory sensation, visceral satisfaction, and it satisfies your nutritional needs. And so I mean, when it comes to portion sizes, I mean, some of that's based on perceived average calorie requirements, but the problem is the calorie requirements often don't fulfill the nutrient requirements. And so, for me, I'm eating, 4 pounds of meat a day, 4,000, 4,500 calories, something like that, which is probably in line with what I need. I'm 6'5", 240 pounds. I'm very active. And so that's probably in line with, I think the calorie requirements are probably okay. But the problem is if you're getting those calories from, whole grain, wheat, sugar and wheat and bread and, cereals, you're not going to hit your basic nutrient requirements. And that's the other thing is when we talk about the environmental concerns around beef is very nutritious. It's not just about calories. If we want to produce the most calories, we just grow sugar. I mean, sugar is a relatively low input, product, and to grow it, you can do it very efficiently, and you can get a lot of calories for it, but you're not getting nutrition. And I mean, that's where the argument needs to be more nuanced, when we talk about the environment.
Well, I think that all the cattlemen and any of the ranchers, they have evidence before them all the time about how nature works. And they also have evidence about how that is managing their microclimate, especially if they're practicing regenerative ag. Then I think that they can speak to what they're calling. It's always the same, isn't it, Doc? Like every time they try to blame nature, the cause is the cure. So raising beef is actually the cure for what they're calling is their climate crisis. That is the cure. And for us to be able to eat enough, I feel like until you were making those videos, by the way, I really think it was like nobody could believe that it's possible to eat that amount of meat. And what I find that I'm pointing out to people is he's eating 6 ribeyes in like 13 minutes. Okay. He's not gagging. He's not burping. He's not belching. I mean, when you watch somebody who has like a pie eating contest and they try to like scarf down or like they're racing to eat like 6 pies, halfway through it, they're about to throw up. And, I think that it's interesting that we can't overeat meat. You can overeat plants, but you can't overeat meat. Don't you find that to be true as well?
I mean, it's hard to overeat meat. I mean, it's not, I won't say it's impossible, but it's very difficult. And yeah, it does has a profound satiating effect. Yeah, I mean, literally, I mean, an hour after I ate six ribeyes, I was in there doing a workout. You know, I've got no digestive issues, no digestive discomfort. If I had eaten a meal that was rich in, you know, fiber-rich vegetables or something like that, my guts would be swollen, bloated. I wouldn't be able to do anything. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not unusual for humans to feast on meat and, you know, maybe go for long periods of time before their next meal, which is also fine. I mean, we've got accounts of, you know, the Lewis and Clark expedition where they're eating 9 pounds of meat a day, is reportedly, which, and the data on that was considered to be pretty good. I mean, we've got the Mongolians would sit down and routinely eat 10 pounds in a sitting. We know, you know, what Eskimos, you know, back in the 1920s when they surveyed them, average was eating 4 to 8 pounds of meat a day. And, you know, part of that had to do with the fact they live in a cold climate and they needed the extra calories to continue to create body heat. But yeah, I mean, we can certainly eat a large amount in one sitting and digest it just fine. And by the way, our body is extremely good at extracting nutrition from meat. So our gut transit time will slow appropriately so that all that nutrition is absorbed. And it's such an efficient way to get your nutrition. And it's, you know, I would say this is how we're designed. In fact, you know, if we look at all species on the planet Earth that have ever existed, something like 85% of them have been carnivorous. That's because it is so much more efficient way to convert nutrition that you eat into, you know, your bodily needs, your structural and your energy needs.
Also, they wouldn't have had any place to store all of that. And I think that people have this misunderstanding that if they killed this large beast, that they're saving it for a really long amount of time, which is not really even true. Like they're actually.
I don't know about that. I think because there are some, you know, tradition, they would dry the meat, they would stick it in ice, you know, if they're in a cold climate, sometimes they put it underwater. So what I would say is that I don't think early humans were starving that often. I think we had an abundant supply of ruminant meat, particularly large grazing herbivores like elephants and mastodons and mammoths, which we were very effective at hunting. That goes even back through to Homo erectus. And they ate whatever they wanted. So they basically, you know, that's how our brains evolved. That's how we had the constant energy input to evolve this big human brain that we have. And that's been the case. You know, the argument that we hear from sort of vegan advocates is the only reason we ate meat is because we were starving and that's all we had. But well, guess what? After people developed agriculture, did they quit eating meat? No, they did not. I mean, so it's part of our human species to eat meat. And again, we have such a sick population right now, and it's getting sicker. And you know, as a push to move away from meat into these fake products, the plant-based analogs, and even the cell cultured meat is only going to accelerate that process and make people, you know, increasingly more sick. And that's not environmentally sustainable either. The healthcare sector is about 10% of our greenhouse gases, if we want to have that conversation. And most of you guys know that even currently, you know, even without regenerative agriculture, beef in the United States is only 2% of our greenhouse gases based on the EPA numbers. So it's a very small amount, but it's being scapegoated. You know, they're not looking at oil and gas and industry and energy sector, which is 80% of our greenhouse gases. So if we're going to have that discussion,
how about naked earth? How about naked soil? How about all the tilling that they're doing? These are the things the farmers know. The ranchers and the farmers out there know that when the soil is naked, it's hotter. They know that that is what creates more problems. And the only way to make sure not to do that is to have, you know, thriving pastures, which you can't have plants without animals. And so I think it's hilarious. As far as the vegan thing goes, I feel like, you know, you can find animals. If you're dropped in the middle of nowhere, you're not waiting to find a garden, or you're not trying to grow something. You're going to kill a creature and survive before you find some plant that's edible, that's going to satiate you and satisfy you and give you the energy to find your way out of wherever you're at. Haven't they already proven that with what are those funny shows like the Naked and
well, yeah, I mean the survival shows, Naked and Afraid and whatever,
right.
Alone and stuff like, yeah, I mean, you know, obviously humans are not vegans. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And you know, the people that actually, you know, it shows to the power of marketing and the gullibility of people. And that's a problem. We've got people that will fall to whatever marketing. The other problem is we have a comfortable population, a population that you know, as long as they're getting their donuts and their Netflix, they don't want to do anything. They become complacent and lazy. And this is, unfortunately, this is a time that we need to stand up. And, because, and one of the things I see, a lot of the ranchers just have access to all this wonderful food, and they're still eating garbage too. And they're not a very good representation of what they are. And so people see these ranchers with big bellies and they're like, well, then obviously it's not healthy. I see the same thing with these barbecue guys. They're drinking all this beer and eating all the sweet tea and the potatoes and the pies that go with it. And everybody blames it on the meat. And so I think we have to, as meat eaters, we have a couple of responsibilities. One is to put out a healthy image, demonstrate health, and two is to, talk about, how we can improve the environment. And I think those are things that have to be done in order to win this battle. Because it's the days of people eating meat because it's good and tastes good, and it's going to sell itself, unfortunately, are over. Even though the product should sell itself, that's not what's going on. You're competing against billions of dollars and trillions.
You're competing against fear, Doc.
Well, you're competing against fear and trillions of dollars of assets. You've got large companies, large corporations, which want to control the food supply, centralize the food supply, and they'll do it by demonizing the individual ranchers and what they produce, and producing really cheap products. They try to do it with beef, right? They try to undercut the rancher, and all the profit goes to the the packers and retailers, and that's not enough for them. Now they want to just put the rancher out of business and grow it all through lab grown meat and GMO monocrop stuff, and make fake meat, because that's even cheaper for them. And so this is what we're seeing, is that the little guys getting squashed while the wealth and power are all consolidated, and then the food supply is consolidated, and it's a dystopian nightmare, and we've got to fight against that.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody, Dr. Baker is saying eat more meat, and also plant meat. Like, why are they making plant-based meat? I think that we can end the vegan conversation with, if vegans were happy being vegans, they wouldn't have to make pretend meat. But
this is a misconception. That product is not designed for vegans. A few vegans will eat it. There's 4% of the population is vegan. 95% of their sales go to omnivores that are guilted into, we're going to give up meat one day a week, and we're going to eat your plant-based slop. This is the market they're after. Remember, the meat industry is something like a $1 trillion industry. And if they can capture 20, 30% of that, they're looking at, $200, $300 billion a year. And so this is that is not targeted to vegans. That's not it. It's stupid, gullible people that eat a standard American diet or omnivores that don't know any better. And they think they're saving the environment. They think they're potentially helping their health. It's all bogus garbage just to sell a cheap product. It's a smoke and mirrors, snake oil marketing scam. So it's not because vegans miss the taste of meat. That may be true too, but the consumer demographic for those products are you and I, or not me or you, because I'm not going to eat that, but the average
ethical vegetarians, the
ethical, the people that think they're making a difference, with their, it's basically just virtue signaling, and it's just nonsense. But they're running with that message.
So suicide isn't ethical, people. That's my take home point for that. Okay, Doc, I just want to address two serious health issues. Well, I know everybody's kind of lost on the cholesterol piece, but I think there's enough folks overcoming that. But I want to talk about kidney health and gout. Now, in your book, you explain this, okay? So anybody, go get his book. He is explaining a lot of these things, but he's, like you're talking about, protein doesn't damage kidneys, but damaged kidneys tend to leak protein. And also, I want folks to understand that protein is our carbs. So can you speak towards that a little bit, please?
Yeah, study after study that's actually looked at, actual interventional studies looking at protein intake, does not damage kidneys. Even in very, very high amounts, even in, as much as 3 grams, 3 grams per kilogram or more, 4 grams per kilogram. That's a lot of beef. That's, that's equivalent of me eating 600, 700, 800 grams of protein a day, which is more than I eat, more than I could eat based on my appetite. So the only problem is there's associational epidemiologic data where they'll look at populations that eat a lot of protein and they have higher levels of kidney disease. But again, this is so highly confounded. It's not good data. And so when you actually do the tests and the studies, in fact, we've seen recent interventional trials where they've replaced things like polyunsaturated fats and refined carbohydrates with protein in people with chronic kidney disease, and their kidney disease has gotten better. In fact, I've seen people with chronic kidney disease going on an all meat diet actually improving and reversing their kidney disease. So protein does not in fact harm kidneys at all. This is based on a Brenner hypothesis back in the 1980s, based on rat studies. And rats are, when you feed them high protein diets, yes, their kidneys will have problems. We are not rats. Humans don't act that way. The fact that you said protein is our carbs, that refers to the process of something called gluconeogenesis. If we're not consuming carbohydrates, which will break down into glucose molecules, our body has the capacity to turn both fat and protein into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis, where it takes certain amino acids and takes the carbon out of there, converts it to glucose. It can take the glycerol background from a triglyceride and also turn that into glucose. So you actually do have glucose using, so you fuel your brain, you fuel your muscles, you restore your liver glycogen, your muscle glycogen, as long as you get adequate protein. Typically protein's a better source. And so you don't run out of glucose. You may not have as much glucose as somebody eating carbs, but you don't need as much, and you can run well. I mean, I've literally set world records as an athlete without eating any carbohydrate. And we're seeing more and more professional athletes switching over to this all meat carnivore diet. Danny Sorensen from the Kansas City Chiefs. There's several professional mixed martial artists. There's several weightlifters, jiu-jitsu champions, rugby champions, endurance athletes, triathlete. The Kona Ironman world champion, Pete Jacobs, is on a carnivore diet. So, that's a fallacy that you have to consume carbs to produce glucose, because that's not true at all.
Thank you for that, because also for naming all these athletes. Also, for anybody out there who thinks that that this doesn't work for everyone because it's the correct human diet, I don't know, maybe you should subscribe to the MeatRx YouTube channel, and you could be annoyed all day with a new testimony every single moment of the day coming through, notification, ding, 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 of one more person testifying that it's working for them. I mean, because it is, obviously. Thank you for doing that, Doc, for having the platform, for establishing the platform. And anybody who's confused about anything, you can go to the platform, you can click on a button, and there's like endless testimony from real people who are saying they're reversing their disease. I think fructose, you're talking about in the book how fructose is a vital component of table sugar, and you're also, you kind of touched on this a little bit with the glucose and the fructose, and how it, but can you go into that just a little bit more again regarding inflammation, how people are confusing uric acid as the cause for gout? I actually had a doctor just yell at me the other day about it, saying, if you would quit eating meat, then, you guys wouldn't have these problems. And I just didn't know if there was anything else that you could break down for people, for them to understand that is not what's causing it.
Yeah, well, uric acid, which most people don't realize, uric acid is actually an antioxidant. It's the most abundant antioxidant in our body. And so one of the interesting things with humans is because we lost the capacity to produce our own vitamin C, and vitamin C is also an antioxidant, but we lost this uricase enzyme, which breaks down uric acid. And so there's some thought that uric acid kind of filled in the proxy role for vitamin C in a lot of reasons. But when it comes to gout, so uric acid is involved in gout for sure. If uric acid crystallizes, it can deposit in joints. Typically we hear about the big toe because of the temperature. The big toe is the coldest part of our body, and it's partly solutes will fall out of solution and crystallize in colder temperatures. You remember that from high school chemistry, perhaps. But uric acid alone, whether it's low or high, is not what's going to cause gout. There has to be a number of other things going on: chronic inflammation or acute inflammation. There's some immunological factors, the acidic environments, temperature, and a host of other factors which play a role in whether or not someone actually has gout or not, regardless of what their uric acid level. That is to say, there can be people with very high levels of uric acid and not have gout. And conversely, there are people with relatively low levels of uric acid that do get gout. Now, what we classically see is, this is, again, this confounded problem where you have the standard American dieter who is developing metabolic syndrome, has insulin resistance, has chronic inflammation, and they might have elevated uric acid levels at the same time. And they will develop gout. So people going on a carnivore diet, initially, if they have a lot of those problems going on, diabetes, inflammation, they may even have a gout episode early on. But what happens is, as their diabetes gets better, as they lose weight, as their inflammation goes away, as their metabolic health improves, the gout seems to go away regardless of what the uric acid level is. And so it's one of those things where it's a dependent variable. It's not an independent variable. It depends on everything else. It's just like the same thing when you talk about cholesterol and some of these other markers. There's a lot of nuance here. And the problem is, many people, including many physicians, don't know how to do this. They're not versed in this stuff. Uric acid, interestingly, there are some associational studies showing that, for instance, if you have higher levels of uric acid, you almost never develop multiple sclerosis, which is kind of an interesting observation. And so uric acid by itself is not something we should demonize, but we should have to put it into context with all these other factors.
Thank you for doing that. Okay, so also you're teaching everybody that we need to change our relationship with food. I'm going to go back to this feasting thing because I swear people don't understand what feasting means. It doesn't mean you eat one whole steak and don't save half of it for later. It means maybe eat 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. And you're saying the end goal of nutrition has a simple 2-pronged explanation. It provides us with energy and gives us structural components to build and maintain our animal-based cells. So, maintaining proper nutrition, because now I hear a lot of carnivores saying they're going to have micronutrient testing, which I think is kind of stupid. Okay, so sir, just so you know, Doc, like I operate under the laws of the universe and under the law of nature specifically. And I believe that if you're operating and honoring the law of nature, which a lot of regenerative farmers are, okay, they get this. And so this is just one more point for them to make when they're touring their farms or their ranch for an eater. They can show them, this is how we're honoring the animals. This is how we're honoring what their proper diet is. So our proper diet can be maintained by, when we're eating beef, when we're eating that animal that's healthier than we are, it's providing us with all the structural components to build and maintain our animal-based cells in a bigger way. Can you speak towards that from a physician's perspective?
Yeah, the point is, we are all made up of animal cells. Every one of our cells in the body is an animal cell. It's not a plant cell. It doesn't have a cell wall. It doesn't we don't have any chlorophyll or fiber in our body. We are basically a collection of animal cells, which are cholesterol-based, fat-based lipid membranes and, protein. And so if we're going to build a house, if we're going to build a brick house, we're not going to build it out of, feathers, right? You want to build the things that you're made of. And so the most efficient way to build and maintain animal cells is to consume them. That just makes sense from first principles. It just so happens that it also works in practicality as well. As far as, some of these thoughts about what we should eat, what our requirements are, the RDA sort of requirements for this and that, those are really arbitrary and based on a population that's not eating an appropriate diet. We have a grain-based diet, which is, a significant part of our diet, and we have requirements based on that to avoid diseases. But when we're not eating all these grains, which potentially bind up, minerals and nutrients, and we can't even absorb them, these so-called anti-nutrients, which are in grains and many plants, it changes how much we require to get the minimum amounts. And so when we're eating meat, particularly, an animal, a cow has many more options of plant foods than I can eat. I can't sit there and eat grass and forbs and all these things that cows can eat. And therefore, they actually become very rich, and even in phytonutrients. We look at guys like Fred Provenza, Stefan Van Vliet out of Duke University doing their research, showing that there's actually a rich amount of phytonutrients contained within the beef. And so particularly when you raise the animals that way, you are getting a broad spectrum of nutrients outside of just amino acids and fatty acids and, the typical vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K, vitamin E, so on and so forth. In fact, it's been shown that beef itself has something like 50,000 unique individual nutritional compounds, the majority of which we have no idea what they do because we haven't tested them yet. So when we exclude meat from the diet, like these plant-based people, we're missing out on the vast majority of those unique compounds. There's a study, again, I'll refer to Stefan Van Vliet's study, comparing the Impossible Burger to a regular old ground beef burger, and only 10% of those compounds did they share in common. So something like 90% of that nutrition is not found in plants that is critical for human function and human development, particularly if we're talking about children. So yes, it is incredibly important to have that in our diet. Now we can synthesize stuff and put synthetic products in there. It's always a second choice. And we're finding that, we're like I said, the people that go on meat-based diets dramatically see a huge difference for the vast majority of them. I mean, literally, I hear people all the time telling me I feel like I'm 20 years younger, and they come off their medications and they come off their lifelong illnesses, whether it's mental health illnesses or physical illnesses. I have people that were bedridden that literally go on a meat-based diet. Now they're 2-3 months later, they're out dancing in the streets because they just have gotten their life back. So it's a huge difference.
We haven't tested for that yet, y'all. Did you hear him? He said we haven't tested for that yet. Well, also we haven't tested for most things because we're not the knowers of all things. I mean, we just figured out anti-nutrients 5 minutes ago. So, I love that in the book, you're talking about how plants are waging chemical warfare. He's breaking it all down in this book, y'all. So you need to get the book and read the book and see what he's talking about, because we don't even have time to get into all of those parts and pieces. But I want to go back to my favorite line in the book is not everything is diet related. And then you also say, you can't worry about every blemish or belch or sneeze because you'll turn into a miserable hypochondriac, which I think that everybody has become hypochondriacs and they're scrutinizing themselves this way with every bite because they're in so much pain. They're just in so much suffering from the plants that are poisoning us that just, they don't work. And so, you say we haven't tested for that yet. I don't trust any of the tests. That's why I walk in the law of nature, because it's the only thing that seems to be solid, which always is pointing us back to the grill. Everybody's like so happy to get to the grill. And you started off talking about the joy, and you always find Dr. Baker standing in front of the grill. He's always eating right there. My daughter, by the way, loves your knife. She's like, that's a real knife. Like, that's a good one. That's a good one. So I feel like, when people go carnivore, they're also starting and intending to fast, even if they're not even eating all the way, like feasting properly. And we talk about how having a coach is important for carnivore or fasting, because I know a lot of folks that I'm coaching, Doc, they aren't feasting, that they can fast. Can you speak towards that a little bit? Because it's very important to feast and not feel guilty about feasting. And then allowing yourself to fast. But if you're not seeing results and you're fasting, because you've heard like carnivore yogi even saying she used to fast, but she can't fast anymore. Or a lot of women who are hitting 50, they're like, we can't do the fasting thing. It's because they never feasted properly, I think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are a lot of people that are using fasting for weight loss purposes, and it can be effective. But you have to have nutrition to do that. I mean, if you eat a junky diet and fast, you're not going to have a good result. In fact, you're probably going to maybe even make yourself worse. And so I think that what we're not designed to do is eat every 15 minutes like most Americans do. And I'm being a little bit hyperbolic there, but I mean, honestly, people eat, for 16 hours a day. They get up in the morning, they have a bowl of cereal, and they have a mid-morning snack, then they have a lunch, and they have a afternoon candy bar, and then they have a dinner, and then they have a late night snack. And so they're eating continuously, in our junk food, snack food industry has sort of perpetuated that. And now the dietitian's telling you got to maintain your blood glucose, so you got to keep eating. And that all just results in everybody getting fat. When you're eating a species appropriate diet, and I would argue for meat being that, or at least majority meat, you tend to not need to eat as often, but you do need to get enough. You just need to eat and listen to your appetite. There's no other animal in the wild that requires an app or a calculator or anything, or a menu to eat. They just eat what's designed for them. I mean, when we're trying to figure out what zebras eat to put them in the zoo, we don't take them shopping at the grocery store and say, hey, what looks good? We know what they're supposed to eat. And the problem is if we look at wild humans, we don't really have any wild humans left anymore. There's very few. But if we look historically and, through the anthropologic and archaeologic lens, we can see that wild type humans were eating these big animals. And so, the appetite tends to line up with that. Now, some people, because their appetite and their relationship with food has been so distorted due to this modern food environment with this hyper palatable engineered food that's designed to stimulate your pleasure centers, they don't really know how to even respond to appetite anymore. So it takes a while to sort of learn that if a steak doesn't sound good, you're probably not hungry. I mean, if you put that down as a cue, you're going to probably fall in a pretty good situation. Many people eat because they're bored. They eat because they're stressed out. They eat because of social pressures, or it's that time of the day, and they're not actually hungry. But if you sit down and you're truly hungry and you just feast until you're full, you're going to line up pretty well. You're going to turn into what I think is a normal, physiologically appropriate, healthy human being, rather than what many people are, which are sick humans. We're not designed to be sick at any stage of our life. I mean, we're designed to be healthy and robust and and function well the entire time we're alive. And then we drop dead at whatever 80, 90 of something, acute, we just die. We don't send right. What it is right now is most people spend 30 or 40 years in pain, suffering, and misery with chronic disease. That is not how any species is designed to operate or live. And when I turned 40 as a physician, I started to feel aches and pains and just not as much energy. And I thought, well, this is normal aging. Well, it's not. It's just common because everybody does it because we're eating a crappy diet. That's not how you're supposed to be. You should be robust. You should be feeling good. You should have good energy, good mood. You should be able to do things physically. You should be able to have a good body composition well into your, whatever, later years. I mean, that's how we're supposed to be. And so this is, again, very much related to diet. There's other things that go in there, I mean, getting adequate sleep and activity levels and, getting out in the sun and all those things, which are how humans were designed. We're not designed to be hiding in cubicles, cowering from the sun and smearing, sunscreen all over our bodies. We evolved under the sun. I mean, the sun is a good thing. It's something that, again, diet is primary, but these other things have a role as well.
Thank you for all of that. And the sun, okay, guys. So I think also that eating this way allows us to tolerate the sun more efficiently, more safely. And also, okay, so we're going to be coming up to the hour here, but I have to touch on 3 really important things. So I just want to go through this one more time. I know I keep asking you about the feasting piece because I'm tired of watching people not eat enough food. They're doing it and they're saying, okay, well, we can fast and, MeatRx supports fasting. It's good. And you can save more money that way than eating more meat. But I want to make it clear to everybody that until you're properly nourished, until you've rebuilt the cells properly, you can't really do that. So, and they want to do it also, Doc, because they think that they'll just remove their toxic cells faster, which might be true, might not be true. I'm asking you, Dr. Baker, if that's true, because I feel like they're making themselves a lot sicker faster and not allowing themselves to be nourished sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, all things being equal, I think it's better to get nutrition. I mean, nutrition is part of health. And, when you're not, I mean, the simplest answer I have is, why are we hungry? What happens when you're hungry? Why would your body tell you you're hungry? Well, the obvious answer is you need to eat something, right? I mean, that's just the kindergarten answer. And it's true. I mean, you're hungry for a reason. And the problem is, again, we tend to feed ourselves food that don't sort of satisfy that hunger. With regard to, toxins, if we look at some of the food, which is quite frankly toxic, some of the stuff we've put in our bodies with all the chemicals and the highly processed oils and the high fructose corn syrups and all that stuff, that is something that, eventually, does sort of accumulate in your body, particularly the oxidized fats. That takes time to go away, but that goes away by not consuming it. So if you're eating meat, you're not consuming these toxic inflammatory compounds. And so that'll work its way out of our body just due to not being utilized. And again, if you're eating appropriately, there's going to be a time where you're not eating. Every night you sleep, you're not eating. You're breaking down some of these products. And so, I guess the desire to fast track, some of this stuff, some of this weight loss, leads people to, do these long fasts. And I think that for some people it's counterproductive. For some people that can't figure out when to eat because their satiety signals have been so screwed up, they might need a schedule. But again, I come back to the natural argument. No other animal needs someone to sit there with a stopwatch, tell them when to eat, when not to eat. And I think humans generally are the same way, operate the same way. And sometimes the food's not available when you're hungry. That's a different story than intentionally making yourself hungry longer than you need to be. So I think, again, it all depends on what you're eating. If you're eating a species appropriate diet, you tend not to overeat. You tend to, your appetite tends to be well regulated.
Okay, and the last important question: iron levels. Now, you've spoken about, heme iron. This is the other concern that I have, that people bring up all the time. And I've noticed that the more people eat this way, the more their, heme iron levels balance themselves out. Even people with, like hemochromatosis. And you've addressed this in the book as well. But you also are saying that it's related to liver disease, which goes back to plant poisoning and inflammation. And I found that, anybody who I had with that, they only needed to give blood a little bit near the beginning. And then after that, they were able to stop doing that because they had no side effects. But some of them were kind of afraid to not donate blood. And the problem I've had is that whenever they donate blood, they take so much of their blood. They don't understand how a pint of blood, giving a pint of blood is a lot of blood. Can you please talk about that?
Well, I mean, we have about 5 to 6 liters of blood, so I'm not going to suggest that you can't donate blood, because people need blood sometimes. But I mean, with regard to iron and iron overload issues, and hemochromatosis. So hemochromatosis is a disease where people store iron in their organs, which can cause organ dysfunction. One of the ways which we regulate, really the only way we regulate iron, is through the absorption standpoint. We can't really get rid of iron very easily. There's, women that have menses will lose a little bit of blood. And you lose a little iron that way. Men aren't doing that. There's some evidence that maybe exercise may allow some to be released, but for the most part, it's on the absorption side. So when you're eating an iron-rich diet, which a meat diet is, heme iron is the bioavailable iron that we need, and it's better for us anyway. But the reason we don't tend to, the reason we accumulate iron in a pathological way is in part due to a hormone called hepcidin. Hepcidin is produced in the liver, and it is under the control of insulin. And so hepcidin allows us to absorb iron by the cells that line our intestines, the enterocytes. And when hepcidin is in the inappropriate amounts, and again, this is regulated by insulin to some degree, then we absorb either too much or not enough iron. When insulin is normalized, hepcidin becomes normalized, and we are able to absorb the iron we need. The iron we don't need just passes right through our digestive tract. We never even see it. And so what happens is, as you get metabolically healthier, as your insulin levels normalize, the iron handling system starts to normalize as well. And so we see even people with familial hemochromatosis. Hemochromatosis, rather. Sorry, I was blanking on the word there. Even folks with hemochromatosis, I see normalize their iron levels. I see people that had to donate blood every single week go to where their iron levels are normal. They don't have to go to any blood anymore. So again, this is a secondary problem with our debilitated metabolic systems, again, based on eating, a garbage diet, which is what many people do.
Well, what I've learned today, again, it's been emphasized, and you can go back, anybody who's missed it, and watch this interview a little bit more, but you just basically keep saying, if you manage your insulin sensitivity, everything else goes away. And we don't have an insulin sensitivity problem when we consume whole foods like meat that our body, because we're animals and we need animal meat. Because I found, Doc, that if I have coconut, I have thyroid issues. If I have any other fats like plant fats that are supposedly the healthy plant fats, then it throws me off. And I mean, I always speak back to the law of nature. I speak back to circadian rhythm. I speak back to, there's no coconuts in North Carolina where I live. So basically, I should just eat what's in my hunting range. If I can't hunt it, I shouldn't eat it. Would you just agree that that's how we should wrap this meeting up and say, just put the meat in the mouth? Is that right?
Yeah, that works pretty well. I mean, again, when it comes to, food variety, I mean, if you think about what we have available to us today versus even if we went back a few hundred years, I mean, a few hundred years, you would be limited to what you could hunt and a few plants that would grow around you. And it's not very much because we didn't have modern transportation. We didn't have modern refrigeration. And so the human diet is not a eat the rainbow, broad spectrum of diet. It's very limited. And meat is primary. So yes, put the meat in your mouth and just eat a damn steak. And a lot of time I could have wrote a book called Just Eat a Damn Steak, and it would have been one sentence, and that would have probably answered it. That would have helped just as many people. Yeah, exactly.
Just eat the meat. What kind of meat? Just eat the meat. Just eat the meat, preferably regenerative.
Yeah,
thank you,
absolutely.
Doc. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for maintaining your constant peace. I really, really appreciate you so much. And thank you especially for the fun videos of you making your steaks and eating them. It's helping. It's really helping. I'm coaching folks and I'm saying, watch Shawn Baker eat. And then tell me that you can't do that, because that's really all. That's really all. Maybe we all just need to start making videos of us eating what we eat and let people see that.
Yeah, well, we need to be proud meat eaters and get that out there. Anyway, Neethi, I got to go do my MeatRx meeting now in 1 minute, so I'll talk to you later. Okay, thank you so much.
So much. I appreciate it, Doc.
Okay, bye bye, and thanks to all the ranchers that are listening. We appreciate what you do. Thanks, everybody. Bye.